Good day, everyone. This is my Lostview for Season 5, Episode 1, Because You Left. And Episode 2, The Lie, I think. I thought that was all like the first episode. I didn't know that was like 2 episodes. But I guess it makes sense because I saw it. Because they did put up the Lost logo, the ending logo at the end of the first one. I don't know, but anyway. Okay, first off, what did I think of the episode? When I first saw it, I actually didn't like it. After reading more explanations about it, more theories, I'm really starting to warm up to it now. There are still things that don't make sense, but like before I go into any kind of theorizing or anything, there's a great thread on the fuselage called The Rules, and it's taken me like an hour just to read halfway into it, but there is some amazing discussion going on that thread, and it has made Lost as a whole make a lot more sense. First off, I think that, because obviously the show is going into this time travel stage thing, which I like we couldn't see that coming. We've been talking about it since the end of Season 3 as far as that goes. Well, what we see a lot of in this episode is characters going back in time and doing things that you would think would change the past. But, geez, my head's already about to explode here, jeez. And a lot of people are asking, well, how can he do that? Because Daniel Faraday said himself, you can't change the past. You can change the future, you just can't change the past. Well, that's kind of hard to determine where the past is and where the future is, because if you go back in time, all of a sudden, the past is the future. So wouldn't it technically be possible to change the future from that point because it is the future at that point? It seems like it would be. But then the question is, well, okay, what if you change something in the past? Why don't other people remember it? Most importantly, Ethan. Okay, so we see in this episode, Ethan turns up at the crash site of the Beechcraft Yemi's plane. And I called it Echo's plane for the longest time. It's like, dude, that's not Echo's plane. What the hell? It's just because you think about Echo when you see the plane. So it's like, oh, it's Echo's plane. I don't know. But yeah, so I'm curious as to why the island would have taken Locke back to that exact point in time, as if there was some kind of significance to that, because nothing really happened there. He didn't get to talk to the guys in the plane, and even if he could, I'm not sure what good it would do. It was funny when Locke first started getting shot at, I thought it was the guys in the plane trying to shoot him, because they had guns, so that would have only made sense, but then it turns out to be Ethan, and it's like, oh my god, Ethan, what the hell? I tried to stay spoiler free, but I couldn't avoid the Ethan thing. I did see that, so yeah. But so a lot of people are asking, okay, well, Ethan shot Locke, and this happened back in the past with the Beechcraft and everything when it first crashed. And people are saying, well, why didn't Ethan remember Locke back in Season 1? And because that's the future from where, that's 3 years in the future from when the Beechcraft actually crashed. The thing of it is, and this is where it gets confusing. Okay, if you start at a certain point in time and you go back and change something, and that causes you to have different memories, or it causes someone else to have different memories, their memory is not going to reflect the changes that you made until they get to that point in time that you came from to make those changes. If I went back in time to like 1999 and did something and altered something, and then eventually I would have to come back to 2009 today. But since I didn't actually make those changes from the stronghold, the point at which I was at, it's like, even though I was technically in 1999 making those changes, I was doing it from 2009 because that's where I'm at. That's how old I am. I'm still 32. I wouldn't suddenly be 22 years old if I went back to 1999. I'd still be 32 because that's how old I am in 2009, because that's what it is right now. It's 2009. So if I did go back and make a change in 1999, well, that's fine. But the changes are not going to reflect the changes in my... Well, it's like Daniel Faraday said, you can't change the past. Those years from 1999 to 2009 have already happened. You can't change the past, so that's already cemented. At least I think it is. I mean, people talk about this string thing, like, well, you could go both ways on it, but so if I went back and changed something for somebody else, and then later I went up to like 2004 to talk to them about it, they wouldn't remember it at that point in time, because their memory is not going to reflect the change until they get to 2009 when I actually made the change, because it was my 32-year-old self. Well, you don't know, not 32, but it was my 2009 self that was making the change. So it would only make sense that what you do in 2009 or from 2009 is not going to manifest itself in someone else's memory until 2009, and that's why Desmond didn't remember whatever he was supposed to. That's why Desmond didn't remember what Daniel said to him until he woke up that day in the bed with Penny, because it was a new memory. But whatever, when Daniel went back and told him that information, Daniel must have done it from a certain time, a certain point in time. That would be the same point in time that Desmond woke up, next to Penny, and said suddenly I have a new memory, because somebody must have just done something, like went back in time and then came back to 5 minutes ago or something like that. And so that took so long to explain, it's not even funny. But that's like my biggest point right there. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I think we're going to have to keep in mind if we're going to understand this season, because people aren't always going to remember things because the change hasn't happened yet, even though it technically did happen. There's another thing, like Frogurt, for instance. Frogurt gets shot by the fire arrows, but that supposedly happened in the past. So people are asking, well, why is he alive on the beach in the future? Well, I think that's because in that future, it all goes back to what Daniel Faraday said about you can't change the past. So in that particular timeline, Neil was still alive. He had still lived up to that point. Even if he did kill him at that point, he still would have had everything that happened to him up to that point. So if he goes back in time from that point and gets killed over here, that doesn't change the fact that he's got all these memories in between here that still happened. So he would still be alive, like, whenever, up until the point at which he went back in time, and then he just wouldn't return when they got back to that point that they traveled back from. It would make sense pretty much, I think. The only thing I have a problem with is the rule that they made up on the spot that Juliet said about, well, you can take things in time with you. You can take objects across time as long as you have them with you. So that's why the raft came in time with them. I mean, unless it's like you have to be touching something, maybe you have to be touching something to take it in time with you. But if that's the case, wouldn't Richard have just touched Locke until the flash happened? That sounded bad. But, like maybe just held his hand until they came back or something, and then he could have gone with him. There's something going on with Richard that he can't actually do this stuff, or that he's not locked onto a certain period in time. So if he jumps around and does things, he actually can change things. Maybe the same is true for Desmond. There might be certain, I don't know, just whatever. So, okay, so that's all the time travel stuff I'm going to talk about. Well, I got a nice little list of notes here. Well, there's not that many notes. I don't know. I probably should have done a little more research on this. I've spent so much time on it as it is. I don't know how much more time I can spend on it without blowing my brains apart. I mean, that's hard to believe that the next episode is already coming on tomorrow. It's just like, wow. And I'm off for 3 days, yes. One thing that I thought was kind of funny was when Locke said, Ethan shot me, and Richard said, well, what comes around goes around. He reversed that expression. It's supposed to be what goes around comes around. He said what goes around. No, he said what comes around goes around, because essentially, they didn't get Ethan back until later, so, It still doesn't make sense, though, that Charlie was the one who killed Ethan, so it wasn't really Locke getting him back, but it was whatever. Cheetos. You gotta have this comfort food, or else you can't, Don't just love that when Hurley says to Saeed, maybe you wouldn't have to go around killing people if you ate more comfort food. And then, the camera pans back to Hurley and he's putting the fry in his mouth just as he goes off the screen. That is hilarious. I don't care what anybody says. That's funny right there. Anyway. Oh, yeah. Okay, some people were saying that Ethan shot Locke. Maybe that's the reason that his legs went out in Season 1 when he went to the plane with Boone. Now, I don't know how much credence that theory holds, because, well, you could argue that it was because of the splinter from when he was building the trebuchet to open the hatch. And that splinter of it went in his leg, and that's why his leg went out. It could have been that. But it did seem like there was more than just, I don't know. It seemed like maybe the effect of Ethan shooting Locke was somehow planted onto that location and, rippled across time so that it would affect him when he came back there at any other time. And maybe that could explain certain other things, like Jack's appendix thing in Season 4. We might find out later that, that only happened because of some other time that he got, repeatedly punched in the stomach, 3 years in the future when he came back to the island. I don't know. Or maybe he got, changed places with Mark Silverman when he was a kid, maybe he went back to when he was a kid and actually rescued Mark Silverman, so he took all those punches to the stomach, and that's why he got appendicitis in season 4. I mean, it's possible. Doesn't appendicitis come from that? I mean, that can cause that, or so I've heard. I don't know. Yeah, so what's going on with Sun? I got no idea. She said she wants to kill Ben. She goes to Widmore and she says, well, you know. Well, first of all, I don't get why Widmore, okay, let's say, she goes and approaches Widmore in front of his building, in front of his associates, and says, we have common interests and all this stuff. And then he comes back later and gets her at the airport and says, you have the audacity to approach me in front of my colleagues, in front of my coworkers. It's like, well, if he has so much power that he can actually do that, then why didn't he just, have her removed from the scene right then when she came up to him the first time?